There's been something needling at me for a couple months now, because I actually did check when this made the news rounds, and it was November. So this has been in my head for longer than I even realized. Stephen Fry. Stephen Fry is a fairly beloved British actor, commentator, something of an icon in a lot of ways. And he made the news back in November, specifically for noting publicly something that I think a lot of us already knew, which was that he intends to maintain his friendship with author JK Rowling, despite not agreeing with her on things. I cannot remember if he specifically said that he disagreed with her on trans issues, but he basically made it a point of, I'm not going to cut off my friendship because other people disagree with her. Part of why this stuck in my head is because, honestly, I can be sympathetic to that. I can be sympathetic to the idea of a relationship that you built with someone and they mean a lot to you, and your direct interactions with them are as good as they've ever been in terms of how you relate to them, how they relate to you. But something about them has come out that makes you uncomfortable. But it's also something that doesn't directly impact you. I mean, I think the go-to example of this would be, the relative at the family dinner who don't get them started on race or on religion or on politics in general or what have you. I think most of us can relate to that. And situations like that can hurt, especially if that family member, say, is someone who we have a particularly close attachment to, someone who means a lot to us. And it's very easy to basically just make the rule at family dinner. Just don't bring that stuff up and everything will be nice and fine and we can have this nice interaction and relationship. But my sympathy in understanding from that perspective can only go so far. Hey there, folks. It's Vera from the editing phase of this thing. I am going to be drifting off of Stephen Fry in specific pretty soon in the video, but before I do, I wanted to make note. I kind of feel like I almost gave him too much credit, because taking a closer examination of his actual statements, he doesn't even really strongly imply that he disagrees with or is made uncomfortable by JK Rowling's sentiments towards trans people. What he says is that it upsets his trans friends. So it's not even a matter of my friend is saying things that make me uncomfortable. It's even one step more removed from that. It's my friends are fighting with each other and I don't like that. And again, while I can have some sympathy for the discomfort of that situation, not taking the time to examine why your friends are fighting with each other just shows how he is viewing this exclusively through the lens of how it impacts him. Because the thing is, unlike most of us and our uncomfortable uncle or aunt or what have you, J.K. Rowling and Stephen Fry are public figures with known positions. You deciding to continue to associate with a relative that is maybe a little racist, maybe a little sexist, maybe a little something, that may or may not be a great thing, but the number of people that kind of impacts, or the number of people might even be aware of that, it's limited. I'm not going to say it's necessarily harmless, kind of depends on the specifics, but the harm is going to be fairly contained, because how many people are even going to know? That's not the case here. And again, that can seem unfair. It seems like there's a different set of rules, a different measure of judgment for public figures, but there kind of is. Not necessarily that something they do is not allowable, but it is allowable for people who are not public figures, or that something they do is inherently wrong and where it's fine for other people. Or, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the severity and the impact of what they do is absolutely out of proportion. So as I said, it may not be a great thing that you continue to associate with that family member. And that might make people who are in the group that family member is railing against think a little less of you. And they may or may not be right in doing so. Again, I think depends a lot on the specifics. It is the same fundamental problem for a public figure like Stephen Fry towards JK Rowling, but the scale and the scope is grander. Not just because there's more eyes, but the potential for damage is a lot greater. As to what that damage could be, well, I will get to that. I do feel that it's worth noting that I'm not trying to single out Stephen Fry because I'm trying to cancel him or anything. He's just the idea that stuck in my head. I mean, there have been a number of people, especially involved in Harry Potter, which Stephen Fry never appeared in the films. He did do some audiobook readings, I believe. But there have been a number of members of the cast, generally skewing on the older side. So folks like Ralph Fiennes, Helena Bonham Carter, the late Robbie Coltrane, who most of them did not defend Rowling's actual position, but they did take her side in the idea that she was being attacked or bullied or canceled. So while most of them, at least again from my memory, did not actually defend her position in any detail, and to the extent that they did, it seemed to be from a position of not actually understanding what it was she was saying and the damage it was doing. That was kind of the feeling when I saw what Ralph Fiennes said. I remember reading it and thinking, this just reads like someone who is just taking the word of his friend that people are bullying her and has not actually looked into what she said and the actual impact of it, which doesn't make it okay for him to just kind of talk bollocks. But like, it made me, I guess, less resentful than I might have been otherwise. But again, overall, it's mostly a defense of her, like, don't be so mean to her. Don't be so rude to her. Why can't we be polite? It's just a difference of opinion. Many people with larger platforms and smarter than me have pointed out that believing that a group of people is a fundamental threat to you is not a difference of opinion because there's no middle ground. When the position of gender-critical people is that trans people existing at all around cis people, particularly cis women, is an inherent threat, that's not just an opinion, that's a political position because you are attempting to control the movement and livelihoods of other people. So no, matter of opinion, it is not. Or at least it's not merely that, and never has been. But as I said, Stephen Fry is far from the first one to sort of talk about her. But it was interesting to me because it stuck in my head because he defended kind of his right to have that friendship. Although I also feel like, before I go too far down this road, it is noting that not every person involved in Harry Potter has sided with JK Rowling. Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson have spoken out against her transphobic views. And also Harry Melling, who played Dudley Dursley, and gotten some backlash for it. With a lot of people saying how they are ungrateful because their careers exist because of her, which is, first of all, debatable. There is no way to prove that they would not have gotten other acting jobs and gotten any kind of comparable career. They're both talented people. But beyond that, that's just an argument that's really gross to me. Because by that mentality, someone should at all times respect and give deference to their parents, no matter how abusive that parent is. Even the most abusive parents in the world, you should still respect and honor and not speak against. And I would say that that is absurd, except I've learned the hard way there are people who do, in fact, believe that or at least espouse it. So it's not exactly fun. Interestingly, though, it is a little bit easier for people like Daniel Radcliffe to talk about these things because they're not involved with the movies anymore. I mean, I'm sure Warner Brothers Discovery would love them to be. They'd love to get them back to like do the Empty Child or some. Was it the Empty Child? No, the Cursed Child. Empty Child's Doctor Who, and Empty Child is good. Cursed Child, that's Harry Potter, and it's quite bad. I'm sure on stage it looked amazing, but like as a story, it's quite bad. But they don't need this work. They made their money. They both have steady careers. They can say what they want. What's somewhat more interesting was what happened to one of the stars of the Fantastic Beasts films. Catherine Waterston played Tina Goldstein, and she was the primary romantic interest for the lead character of Newt Scamander. She was arguably the co-lead of the first two films, and then she spoke out very directly against JK Rowling's transphobic views. And then somehow in the third one, the previous romantic lead and virtual co-lead of the franchise was relegated to little more than a cameo. Isn't that interesting? I tangented a little bit on that issue, but my point being that I don't want to give the impression that like all people involved in Harry Potter have defended her. Some have, some haven't. And Stephen Fry's relationship with her seems to be not as tied into that franchise as much. Again, I know he's done some stuff related to it, but again, he defends his right to maintain that friendship. And as I said, I do get it. But seeing that he is known publicly as an advocate for queer causes, for the LGBTQIA plus community.
And I just want to salute and send my love and support to all my trans friends and all trans followers and people watching.
To see him voluntarily stand alongside JK Rowling, that actually is inherently damaging in a number of ways. One of those is that his position as an advocate for the queer community creates an image that could be interpreted as, oh, look, there's someone who is a trans ally and who's still standing right beside her. Oh, I can still claim to be an ally or even believe that I am and still consume her works and Harry Potter related things. This is obviously coming up a lot right now with the impending release of Hogwarts Legacy, which I don't want to dwell on all that much. I honestly, even without everything going on, I wouldn't really have a lot of interest in it. It's not my kind of game. There are, if the overall narrative is what the current public understanding of it is painting it as, there's plenty that's actually going to be dang problematic, completely separate from the way in which it bolsters the voice of and financially benefits JK Rowling. But one of the things that's been very frustrating for me, especially with the impending release of that game, is seeing comments from people that basically amount to, I'm a trans ally, but I still intend to buy this game, followed by whatever rationale they give, whether it's because, well, she's already rich, a little bit more money won't matter. I did a whole other video where one of the major points I landed on in the back end of that was talking about how she has said very clearly she considers every single penny of residuals she gets to be a validation and affirmation that people agree with her. So even if you think putting your money towards Harry Potter doesn't mean you agree with her, she certainly thinks it does. So, but there's people who rationalize it that way. There's people who try and justify, well, we have to help the developers and the production studio. The developers aren't going to get residuals. They already got paid. And if the development studio is on any kind of solid footing, they should already be working on a new project. And if they get canceled, then that was probably already going to happen. If the studio, which I do believe is owned by Warner Brothers, is shut down, it will not be because this game did or didn't sell well. It will be because they probably had a plan to eventually make them redundant anyway. It's actually incredibly typical in the video game sphere. But again, regardless, the actual devs, the coders, the testers, they aren't going to see any bonuses, additional funds. And there's no guarantee that their workplace would remain in business, whether this is a hit or not. It could be a massive hit, and they could still get shut down and have the maintenance and updating handed off to a cheaper third-party studio now that all the big infrastructure and the heavy legwork was done. So I don't accept that point either. But then there are some people who are more honest, which is they just say, I just really want to play it. I just really want to engage in that world. I've dreamed of a game like what this purports to be. And I do get that. But while I can respect the honesty of it, you're saying that the material deficit to the impact on the lives of trans people matters less than your enjoyment of a product. There's also, of course, the people who just openly flaunt their hatred of trans people, but that's not really who I feel like dealing with today. But yeah, there's a lot of that too. And this is the point where it's worth bringing up. No ethical consumption under capitalism. I am certain that there is someone somewhere who suffered or is living in under circumstances that are not ideal and worse than they should be, that contribute, and that situation was compounded in order to enable the creation and building of nearly everything I enjoy. Pretty sure everything on this shelf in some way reflects that. And yeah, that's true. And hypocrisy is unfortunately a fact of life. But here's the thing. I can acknowledge that fact and also acknowledge that it's not okay. Acknowledge the fact that, yes, I do still participate in the society and the culture that does these things and is built this way. But what I won't do is I won't claim to be an ally of sweatshop workers while buying cheap clothes. Now, does that mean my conscience is clear? No. No, it doesn't. But there's something about the level of insult to injury. To hear someone say, I support trans people, I'm against her transphobia, but I'm still going to buy this game. Or to hear Stephen Fry say, I support trans people. I support your rights. But I'm still going to stand next to the public face of transphobia in the UK, a country in which real policy is being made to make the lives of trans people worse. You can't do that and claim to care about us. You can't. And I'm not saying Stephen Fry or Ray Fiennes or Helena Bonham Carter are obligated to cut ties or end a friendship with JK Rowling. They're their own people. Do what feels right. But don't tell me that you're my ally while standing directly next to somebody who has actively supported and had lunch with people and groups who say I should be dead. There was a TikTok a couple months back from a creator who I think I had even still been following at that point. She did a lot of Harry Potter content, but she had in her bio that she stood with the trans community. And apparently she had gotten invited to the premiere of the third Fantastic Beasts film and attended and did a lengthy TikTok saying how great it was, basically serving as part of the marketing and promotion for that film. And I went off because the audacity to claim to be an ally while actively promoting that film, I was very angry. And I wasn't even angry at the promotion. I was angry that she claimed to be an ally. But that word meant so little. Because if you're going to make any claim or present yourself in a way that even implies that you stand with us, that means you have to take a stand. And taking a stand means losing something. Whether it be a piece of entertainment you might have otherwise enjoyed, whether it be a friendship that you cherish and has meant something to you. But that's what it means to take a stand. And you're not required to do that. If you're not prepared to make those sacrifices, that's your decision to make. But don't claim to stand with us or beside us or support us or want better things for us while refusing to stand next to us and instead standing alongside the people who are trying to strip our rights. And this is by no means restricted to trans issues. What I just said applies to basically every marginalized group. People of color, the disabled, fat people. So many groups get trodden on all the time. And honestly, despite being trans and going through a lot of crap for being so, I've still got a lot of privilege. I'm white, for a start. I know that I still probably have a lot of blind spots. And I try, to the best of my ability, to be as much of an ally as I can to people of color, to the disabled, to the neurodivergent, to so many people, to fat people. Yeah, they are genuinely just stamped on. It's one of the few groups I would say right now where it's socially acceptable to openly hate them. But I also, while I will say that I try, and I'm not even sure I can say I do my best, I probably could do better, I don't feel comfortable assigning the role of ally to myself. In my mind, ally is really something that should be bestowed upon you by the people that you are an ally to. Because if you either outright claim to be or simply behave in a position of being perceived as an ally to a group, but you are ignoring that group, that group is saying, hey, Stephen Fry, you standing alongside JK Rowling and saying that it's possible to maintain a friendship with her creates an opening through which other people will use other means to rationalize maintaining connections with people who are doing damage or to continue to support her in some way because they can go, well, Stephen Fry is still friends with her. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. How tangible is that damage? I don't know. I can't quantify that blow for blow. But the damage she is doing is immeasurable. Is that Stephen Fry's fault, strictly speaking? No. No, it's not. It would be absurd for me to claim that it is. But he's continuing to stand by her as she does it. And I know how valuable friendships can be I know how much it can hurt to have such a strong connection, such a meaningful bond with someone, but for this thing. And I know how tempting it can be to hand wave that away when it's something that you have the privilege of not discussing. Us at our family dinners, we have the privilege of simply not bringing up the topic that will set off that one relative. Stephen Fry has the privilege of just not discussing trans rights around JK Rowling. And then the rest of their relationship can be wonderful. We don't have the privilege. We are trans. And we can't just ignore that. And honestly, a lot of us would like to. I don't hear it as much now, but I remember a few years ago that it would become a thing like, oh, after you people come out, all you do is talk about being trans. It's like you make it your entire personality. Well, a lot of us have to keep talking about it because you won't let us forget. Even if we wanted to simply just live and exist. Like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't. I honestly, truly don't want to talk about these people, this subject. I don't. But the world will never stop treating me a certain way because of the fact that I'm trans. It will not let me forget the fact that I'm trans. And so whenever I hear the accusation of like, oh, trans people are so obsessed with JK Rowling, we're really not. I would love nothing better than to never talk about or think about her ever again for the rest of my life. But it's like you're trying to just walk down the street and somebody is right next to you shouting at you, and you turn and go, hey, could you stop, please? And then everyone else around you go, hey, why are you so obsessed with this person? Why don't you leave them alone? Like, but they're shouting in my face. No, you're clearly obsessed with them. Stephen Fry has the privilege to not have to think about transness because that's not his experience. I have the privilege that I don't have to think about race. I try to not take excessive advantage of that. Again, sure there's more I can be doing, but it's a privilege I have. There's plenty of privilege to go around. We don't get to not think about the harm being done to us, the restrictions of our rights. As states like Oklahoma propose legislation that would make it a crime to give gender affirmation medical care of any kind to anyone under the age of 26. This is not even surprising. Because the thing is, when gender critical people wedge their foot in the door, initially trying to do it with bathrooms, and then later with gender-affirming care for young people, they were getting their foot in the door by claiming, we're just worried about people who are minors making decisions that they're not ready to make. Well, now they're coming for adults, legal adults, old enough to drive, vote, own property, drink, join the army, die for their country. Not old enough to take estrogen or testosterone, if it is for gender-affirming care. Any advocate, civil rights advocate, or queer advocate could tell you, and most of them have been, that this was coming. It was never going to stop at just the bathrooms. It was never going to stop at just, well, we won't let minors transition. there's always more. Appeasement doesn't work. They weren't going to stop there. The goal of people like JK Rowling, and definitely the stated goal of many of the people that she has associated with in the groups that she has shouted out, is to criminalize and in some way eliminate transness. They want us gone. That's always been the goal, but they had to start smaller, and now their foot's in the door and they're wedging it further in. This was always going to be the case. And understand, I'm generally cautious of making slippery slope arguments. But if you think that if this can get passed in Oklahoma, that they're going to stop at 26, you're just not thinking through it all. Why would they stop there? Why when they can keep going? And I'm very cautious of slippery slope arguments because I'm actually very quick to say a slippery slope argument is a coward's argument. Because in a situation where we're debating the merits of this, you're saying, okay, but if we allow that, but then this, and then that happens, and we all agree that that's bad, right? And suddenly you using a slippery slope argument, you create a debate about this thing, this hypothetical thing that isn't even going on, as a way to derail progress on the original thing.
Now absolutely, positively guarantee that the next movement is not going to be allowing people to marry their pet, horse, dog, or cat. And you know what? Given the anything goes culture we live in, I don't think they can deliver that guarantee.
So that's why it's a coward's argument, but there is a situation in which a slippery slope works, and it's where there's precedent. And there is precedent for the initial restrictions of the rights of a group of people not stopping at just one thing and going further as far as they can push it. There are tons of instances with many different groups. There's a lot of precedent for what's going on. And as all this is happening, people will say, I have nothing against trans people, while they pre-order Hogwarts Legacy, or Stephen Fry will say that he has no ill will to trans people, while continuing to stand next to the face of transphobia in a country where it is becoming institutionalized. You may have noticed that I'm not shouting in this video. I'm not even angry, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted by people, not only people who claim to be allies, but actual trans people who are still going to get this game. And I can't even bring myself to have that much anger to them. They want something to give them some joy in their lives, and I can understand that. I mean, I still talk about Doctor Who, despite the issues with the BBC News arm. I would point out it's slightly different in that I talk about Doctor Who, which is made by the drama department. The news arm is generally the bigger issue. And I also have the note at the start of all my Doctor Who stuff. I'd love to take it down. I'm not gonna. But again, you know, no ethical consumption under capitalism. It's all too interconnected. But I see trans people say they're still going to get it. And some of them, you can tell, are agonizing over that fact, while others are just choosing to wash it aside with some of the rationales I said before. Well, I'm not thinking of it as helping her. I'm thinking it's helping the developers. It's just a drop in the bucket. She has all this money anyway, whatever it may be. It's exhausting. It's tiring. And it doesn't go away. I'm dealing with it more now because, as I said, Hogwarts Legacy is coming out. And as a result, tons of videos that I've done in the past that even vaguely tie into either that game or JK Rowling are getting bombarded with fresh hate comments. Every day, I have to block dozens of accounts when I see hate comments on my videos and in replies to other commenters. I would love to not have to do it anymore. But I'm also not going to stop. And understand, most YouTubers of my size will either outsource somebody to handle their moderation, or they'll just give up on the comment section. I don't really have the ability to outsource that, and I will continue to do it myself, because I've known for too long that there are people, some of my audience, that part of why they're here or feel safe commenting is they feel that my comment sections are nicer than others. They're not perfect, and I don't catch everything. I try. But I'm not going to concede that ground. I'm done conceding anything. I will not concede the idea that you can in any way, shape, or form support someone like JK Rowling, or the vast majority of the members of the GOP, or the GOP as a whole, and claim to be an ally to trans people. I will not concede that, not even in principle. I will concede no ground, because appeasement doesn't work, and you're not looking to find a middle ground where we can all live happily. You want me gone, and I won't go. Because as I have been hearing as a chant since the 90s, when this phrase meant nothing to me personally, because I didn't think it would apply to me, but it does. I'm here. I'm queer. And I'm not going anywhere. And if you find that inconvenient, if that makes you feel bad, if my presence feels like I'm trying to guilt you because you want to buy this game, or if it makes you think about things you'd rather not think about, or if you think I'm ugly, tough shit. I'm not going anywhere. Whether it is fair weather and fake allies, or outright hatred, you will not deter me. You will not stuff me back into the closet. Because we do have actual allies, people who actually stand with us, and we have each other. If you want to buy that game, you buy that game. Just don't claim to be an ally. And if the idea that you can't claim that anymore makes you uncomfortable, maybe examine that. Or admit, at least to yourself, that maybe even if you don't actively hate us, you don't care about us enough to inconvenience yourself. Start with honesty, at least with yourself, if no one else. And Stephen Fry, just admit to yourself that our well-being matters less to you than your friendship. That is your choice. You have a right to make it. And you can continue to raise all the money you like for queer causes. Actually, I hope you will continue to do so. But it won't offset what she's doing, bolstering her voice and lending validity, giving people an out at all to think they can continue to support her without doing damage, or that maybe it's just not that bad. The world is messy, and it sucks. It sucks. And I'm not without sympathy. But I also won't budge. Stubborn bastard that I am. As these things happen, and as they weigh on me, And on the times that I can't get them out of my head, I'll be back. And you can choose to be here or not. But I'll still be here. Thank you for listening. If you want to support my ability to continue to be here, I have a Patreon, and there's other things besides. There's links down in the description for all of that. But the thing I need you to remember as we move forward as best we can, and I do mean this to anyone who is still watching, even if you disagree with me, even if you're going to buy that game, even if you're Stephen Fry, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. Though if you are going to buy that game, or if you are Stephen Fry, you're not an ally. But regardless, if you are still watching, you are the council. And I'm just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Well, it's Patreon supporter shout-out time, folks. So thank you to Robin Moore, Zubin Lutfula, Tarak, The Thing That Goes Doink in the Anime, Oliver B., Angus Bjarnason, Linda Walters, Emu Delkey, Theotha Boyd, Toy Lowly, Becky Spark, Fernabilax the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, General Contact Unit Problem Child, Angry Gasperl, Tim Price, Adam R.D.L. Taylor, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Thanks so much for your help. You can get your name read out too. Check out the rewards in the Patreon. Is that what they should do? Should they check the Patreon?